Situation Critical, the first segment in our program, sets the stage for everything that follows. In the following presentation, we're going to take a look at three things. We'll start by looking at some population statistics. Then we're going to take a look at some population trends. And finally, we'll switch gears and take a look at the current crop of American elders, focusing on such things as their health, their wealth, and their cognitive abilities. A famous demographer once said that 80% of everything can be explained through demographics. The big trend in demographics in America in the coming years is the aging of our population, a veritable silver tsunami that's washing upon our shores. The aging of the American population, as we shall see, will have enormous implications for our society in such areas as healthcare, social services, the economy, and elsewhere. So let's get right into it, starting with demographics and demographic trends. In this slide, we take a look at the growth of the world's population over the course of the past 2,000 years. If we go all the way back to 1 AD, it's estimated that world population was around 300 million people. 16 centuries later, world population had grown to 500 million people. It had grown by a mere 200 million more people. This is very anemic, slow growth over a long period of time. But then something remarkable happens. Starting in the 18th century, world population begins to explode. Between 1650 and 1750, world population grows by almost 300 million people, significantly more growth than what had been experienced in the previous 1,650 years. Between 1750 and 1850, another 470 million people are added to world population. And then between 1850 and 1950, world population almost doubles in that 100-year period, growing by over 1 billion people. And then, in the following 59 years, from 1850 to 2009, world population more than doubles again, adding 4+ billion people. Now, at the end of 2009, world population stood at 6.79 billion people. We hit a new milestone in October 31st, 2011. And that was the date at which the world population reached 7 billion people. So the key point in this slide is that world population grew anemically for hundreds and hundreds of years, but in the last 300 or 400 years, it has started to grow exponentially. It's been an explosion in population in the last short period of time. Now this is interesting because if we look at the next slide, which focuses on birth rate per thousand, we find that during this period that we saw exponential growth in world population, the birth rate was actually dropping like a stone. Starting at 80 births per thousand in 1 AD, the birth rate proceeds to drop to 60 births per thousand in 1650, 50 births per thousand in 1750, 38 births per thousand in 1950, and an all-time low of 20 births per thousand in 2009. In fact, this trend continues. The latest stats for 2011 indicate that the world birth rate per thousand in 2011 was 19 births per thousand, or half what it was as recently as 1950. Now, all of this raises an interesting question. At the same time that world population has been growing on an exponential basis, the birth rate has been dropping like a stone, which is counterintuitive. It just doesn't make sense. Why would the world population explode at the same time that the birth rate's dropping? Well, the next slide attempts to answer the dilemma. A reduction in the birth rates, all things being equal, should result in a reduction in population. But why is this birth dearth creating an explosion in population? We've identified 5 key areas. First of all, there's been a dramatic lowering of the infant mortality rate across the globe. It's estimated that in 1 AD, the infant mortality rate was 500 deaths per thousand, or 1 out of every 2 infants died in infancy. In the US today, just over 7 deaths per thousand is the infant mortality rate. So we've gone from 500 deaths per thousand a couple thousand years ago down to 7 deaths per thousand currently in the US. A second reason to explain this dilemma of a population explosion at the same time that we have a drop in the birth rate has to do with improved sanitation. 200 years ago, open sewers running through our streets were common. We couldn't rely on safe drinking water. We've made enormous strides on these 2 fronts in the last couple of 100 years. And again, this helps to explain how we can have a drop in the birth rate at the same time that we have a population explosion. A third factor to help explain the dilemma is better nutrition. Starting with the introduction of the potato into the diet on a widespread basis back in the 1700s, we've made enormous strides in terms of the quality of the diet we have. As recently as 75 or 80 years ago, it was uncommon to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables 12 months of the year. Now, we take for granted that we have access to fresh fruits and vegetables 12 months of the year at reasonable cost. A fourth factor to help explain the population explosion at the same time that the birth rate dropped is a safer environment. As recently as 50 years ago, no one wore bike helmets, or seat belts for that matter. Cars didn't have crumple zones or multiple airbags. So again, we've made enormous strides in terms of the safety of our environment, which helps to explain how we can have a dropping birth rate and a population explosion. And the final factor that helps to explain this dilemma, superior health care. Medical procedures and miracle drugs that we take for granted were little more than science fiction as recently as 50 or 60 years ago. As noted, we're living a lot longer, and this has produced what has been dubbed a revolution in longevity. In the past 150-odd years, life expectancy in the United States has doubled. People are now living dramatically longer than at any point in history. Go back a few thousand years, and life expectancy at birth was estimated to have been 10 to 12 years. As you can see, life expectancy at birth now in the US is up to close to 80 years of age. Dramatic improvement over a couple thousand years ago, a dramatic improvement even over as recently as 1850. Now I should note that this chart looks at unisex life expectancy at birth. By sex, life expectancy at birth changes somewhat. In the United States, for example, the life expectancy at birth for females in 2011 was 80.93 years. For males, it was 75.92 years. So life expectancy at birth for females is actually about 5 years longer than for males currently in the US. It's also worth noting that this chart looks at life expectancy at birth. Older Americans have life expectancies that go well beyond the figures we're looking at here. In fact, at age 75, an American woman can expect to live on average to almost 88 years of age. This is an important factor to consider because when people look at their life expectancy and how long they're going to live after they retire, many assume that they'll be dead by their late 70s. In fact, a healthy 65 or 70-year-old can expect to live well into their 80s and possibly even into their 90s. The revolution in longevity is also reflected in changes in the median age in the US. Median age is not average age. It is the age at which half the population is younger and half older. In the United States, median age has more than doubled since 1820. Note the slowdown in the increase in median age between 1940 and 1980 on this slide. This is largely a reflection of the baby boom. Obviously, if a society produces a lot of children, that will stabilize the median age or even cause the median age to drop. In terms of median age, the United States is a somewhat more youthful country as compared to Japan, Italy, and Germany. In fact, the median age in Japan is 44.6, in Italy 44.3, and in Germany 43.7. They are among the oldest societies on the planet. In this slide, we take a look at population trends in the United States, specifically the distribution of population across different age groups. Low birth rates and dramatic increases in life expectancy are about to have a major impact on the composition of our population. In 1990, the United States had close to 250 million citizens. Roughly 21% were under the age of 15, close to 13% were 65 years of age and older, and the balance, the 15 to 64 age segment, or the working population, represented about 66% of the population. The dependency ratio, the ratio of the working age population to the population of dependents, was roughly 2 to 1. In other words, there were 2 people working for every dependent. Now that was the situation in 1990. Let's take a look at the shift that took place between 1990 and 2007. On a percentage basis, there were slightly fewer children in 2007 than there were in 1990. They represent about 20% of the population. And elders represent about 12% of the population in 2007. And there are slightly more people in the working age group. Now, the latest statistics on this front, moving up to 2010, in 2010, the underage 15 population represented just under 20% of the population, and the 65 plus segment of the population had grown to 13% of the population. Okay, finally, we're going to take a look at a projection of what the U.S. population is likely to look like in 2050. And this projection is based on information from the Census Bureau. And here's what things are going to look like. Total population in the U.S. will grow to about 409 million people in 2050. But this growth, as you can see, is quite uneven. Between 2007 and 2050, the working age population will grow by 17%. The under 15 population will grow at double this rate, or about 35%, and the elder population will quite literally explode. In 2007, there were 36 million Americans aged 65 and older. In 2050, there will be 87 million elders, a growth rate of 141%. Between 2007 and 2050, the dependency ratio, again the ratio of the working population to the dependent population, will go from 2 to 1 to 1.4 to 1. There will be fewer working people, also known, by the way, as the people who pay the bills, to support the dependent population. Worse, the cost of expensive elder entitlements like Social Security and Medicare will skyrocket. Given the huge bills that are going to come due during the next 30 to 40 years, it's a good thing to know that the federal government isn't running large current deficits. Wait a minute, they are running large current deficits. This is going to be a problem. Social Security is already the largest expenditure of the federal government. Imagine what's going to happen when we have 141% more elders in 2050. By the way, Social Security is a pay-as-you-go program. What this means is that current benefits are paid out of current revenues. Although a Social Security trust account exists, it exists only on paper. No money has been set aside, and future generations will be on the hook to cover the benefits of future retirees. The net present value of the unfunded liabilities in Social Security to keep the program going until 2085 total $5.3 trillion. Now, people get a little mixed up when it comes to large numbers. To put $1 trillion into perspective, consider this. If you were to start counting seconds and you wanted to count to the number 1 million, it would take you 11 days, counting constantly, to get to 1 million. If you wanted to count to 1 billion seconds, it would take you not 11 days, but 30 years. If you wanted to count to 1 trillion seconds, it wouldn't take you 11 days or 30 years. It would take you 300 centuries to count to 1 trillion seconds. And the point here is $1 trillion is a lot of money. Let's take a look at Medicare. The net present value of the unfunded liabilities in Medicare, Part A only, to keep it going until 2085, total a mind-numbing $13.4 trillion. If we want to sustain Social Security and Medicare beyond 2085, it will require $60 trillion, or roughly $400,000 to $500,000 per American household. Now, I should mention that $60 trillion would sustain Social Security and Medicare A to 2085. If we also look at Medicare B, C, and D, the total rises to $107 trillion. That's what would be needed to sustain those programs beyond 2085. And $1.7 trillion is equal to 7 times the entire U.S. economy. Thanks to the aging of our population, the United States is going to have a massive fiscal problem. And the vast majority of the population seems to be in denial. In the coming years, our governments are going to lose their fiscal capacity to take care of us with programs like Social Security and Medicare. And when this happens, who's going to take care of us? Well, we're going to have to take care of ourselves. And this is the silver lining for those of you in the financial services business. Your investment and insurance product solutions are designed to help people to take care of themselves. And these products are bound to be in great demand in the immediate future when the silver tsunami washes ashore. Just to summarize, a couple of key points. The current aging of the population is unprecedented. This type of aging of a population has never happened before in the history of mankind. We are boldly going where no society has ever gone before. One of the societies that's led the charge is Japan. In fact, in 1996, Japan made history. They became the first society in the history of mankind to have more citizens over the age of 65 than under the age of 15. And we'll be there soon. This trend, the aging of the population, will continue throughout the 21st century and beyond. It isn't just a function of the baby boomers aging, getting old, we have problems, and then they die out. This is a continuing trend that isn't impacted entirely by the baby boom. Third point, The aging of society is a global phenomenon. It is happening in every country in the world, with the exception of some countries in sub-Saharan Africa. It's also enduring. We aren't going to go back to the good old days anytime soon. And finally, it will present us, as we've seen, with a number of significant challenges. Okay, now let's switch gears. We've talked about the aging of America's population and the challenges that this will create. Now we're going to take a quick look at elders in America. First off, elders in America are not a homogeneous group, and they don't fit the old stereotypes of granny knitting in a rocking chair. They're much, much different than that. In fact, in America, there are 3 distinct elder cohorts. A cohort, by the way, is a group of people born around the same time who have shared a series of common experiences. Again, a group of people who are born around the same time who share a series of common experiences, and as a result, they tend to think alike. In America, there are 3 distinct elder cohorts: the classic/early baby bust, the late baby bust, and the baby boomers. Note that the American Initiative for Elder Planning Studies considers a person an elder